true disturbing creature found in Great Sand Dunes National Park. The summer of 2022 was supposed to be an escape. I had always been drawn to the Great Sand Dunes National Park, captivated by the towering dunes that rose like ancient giants against the backdrop of the San Luis Valley. My plan was to camp beneath the stars, disconnected from the chaos of city life. Little did I know, the wilderness held secrets that were better left undisturbed. On the first night, I set up my tent near Medano Creek, lulled by the sound of the water bubbling over smooth stones. As darkness enveloped the dunes, I could see the Milky Way sprawling overhead. I felt a sense of peace, but as the night deepened, an unease settled in my stomach. The winds whispered through the dunes, but their voice was different, almost alive. I dismissed the feeling and crawled into my sleeping bag, letting exhaustion pull me under. Hours later, a rustling noise jerked me awake. At first, I thought it was just a creature of the night, a coyote or a raccoon. But the sound was too deliberate, too close. My heart raced as I unzipped my tent, peering into the darkness. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the dunes. I squinted into the shadows, and that's when I saw it. At the base of a nearby dune stood a figure, its silhouette twisting unnaturally. It was humanoid, but something was wrong. It was too tall, limbs elongated in grotesque angles. Its skin glistened, a sickly pale under the moonlight, like a corpse that had spent too long in the water. Fear gripped me. I ducked back into my tent, heart pounding. Should I scream? Should I run? I opted for silence, hoping whatever it was would lose interest. The rustling continued, now accompanied by soft, guttural noises, muffled sounds that chilled me to the bone. As the minutes dragged on, I remembered a local legend. They said the dunes were alive, a place where the lost souls of travelers roamed. They warned of a creature that lured the curious into the depths of the sands, feasting on their fear. Had I stumbled into its territory? Suddenly, the sound stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear anything outside. Then came a soft tapping on the tent. My mind raced. Was it a branch, or was it the creature? I was frozen in place, unable to move, to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the tapping ceased. I didn't dare unzip the tent again, too terrified of what I might find. Instead, I lay awake, my eyes fixed on the fabric above me, waiting for dawn. As the first light broke, I cautiously emerged from my tent. The world felt different, tainted by what I had experienced. The dunes loomed silently, but I could see fresh prints in the sand, long thin impressions that ended abruptly, as if the creature had simply vanished into thin air. I packed my things, every instinct screaming for me to leave. As I hiked back to my car, I glanced over my shoulder frequently, half expecting to see it following me. The park was beautiful in the daylight, but I could never shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Weeks later, back in the safety of my apartment, I couldn't shake the memory. I searched online for any mention of similar sightings. That's when I found a thread buried deep in a forum dedicated to the park. People spoke of their own encounters, shadowy figures, strange noises, and the feeling of being watched. One post caught my eye. A hiker claimed to have found a half-buried bone in the sand, an impossibly long femur that didn't belong to any animal he recognized. His photo showed a twisted, cracked surface that seemed almost alive. The user's final note was chilling. I felt it watching me. I tried to convince myself it was all a hoax, but the unease settled back into my bones. What had I really seen? And was it watching me even now? More wilderness horror stories. As the days turned into weeks, my nightmares grew darker. I began researching other locations, hoping to find some clarity. I read about a woman who ventured into the woods of the Appalachian Mountains, only to vanish without a trace. Her last known location was near a grove of ancient trees, rumored to be a gathering place for spirits. Another tale spoke of a family camping near the Pacific Northwest, only to be stalked by a creature that mimicked their voices, drawing them deeper into the forest. They left everything behind, running for their lives, but their campsite was never found. Each story felt intertwined with my own experience at the Great Sand Dunes, like a thread in a tapestry of dread. I couldn't escape the sensation that something was out there, just beyond the veil of the ordinary, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too far. The allure of nature had always been its beauty, but now I knew the truth. The wilderness held horrors that were both ancient and hungry. and no matter how far I ran, I would never be free of the gaze of the creature I had encountered. Perhaps one day it would find me again. The whispers in the pines. After my harrowing experience at the Great Sand Dunes, I sought solace in a different kind of wilderness. The Appalachian Mountains had always drawn me with their lush greenery and towering pines. I hoped the beauty would wash away the unease that clung to me like a second skin. I rented a small cabin deep in the woods, far from civilization. The first few nights were peaceful, the only sounds being the rustling leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. But on the third night, as I sat on the porch sipping coffee, I heard it, a faint whispering that seemed to drift on the wind. It was indecipherable, but the tone felt wrong, unsettling. I shrugged it off, blaming it on the rustling branches. But as night fell, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me, but sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadowy figure from the dunes, lurking just outside my cabin. When morning broke, I decided to hike a nearby trail, hoping to clear my mind. The forest was breathtaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every crack of a twig sent shivers down my spine. I walked deeper into the woods, drawn by an instinct I couldn't explain. That's when I stumbled upon the grove. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled roots snaking through the earth like fingers grasping for something long buried. In the center stood a massive twisted tree, its bark blackened and scarred, as if it had endured countless storms. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, enticing and frightening. Suddenly, I noticed something shimmering at the base of the tree, a collection of trinkets, old coins, bent silver rings, and small, crude figurines. They looked like offerings, left by those who had come before. I reached out to touch one, and a chill swept through me, paralyzing my hand midair. The whispers transformed into a chorus of pleading voices, echoing through my mind. "Help us," they cried. "Free us." I stumbled back, horrified, realizing these were the souls of those who had been lost in these woods, trapped by the malevolent energy that pulsed from the tree. I turned to flee, but the path seemed to shift and twist, the trees closing in around me. Panic surged as I fought to find my way back. The whispers turned to screams, urging me to stay, to join them. I ran, adrenaline pushing me forward until I burst onto the main trail, breathless and wild-eyed. Back at the cabin, I barricaded the door, my heart racing. I tried to rationalize it, convincing myself that it was just my imagination. But that night, the whispers returned, louder than before. They clawed at my sanity, promising secrets and safety, but I knew better. I had seen what lay at the heart of those woods. By dawn, I was packed and ready to leave. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the towering pines fade into the distance. Instead, I caught a glimpse of something dark moving among the trees, a shadow, writhing and watching. The haunting of Pine Hill months later, I found myself back in a city that felt too loud, too bright. I needed to escape again, and that's when I heard about Pine Hill, a spot infamous for its dark history. Locals warned of strange happenings, lost hikers, eerie lights in the forest, and the occasional whisper of a woman's voice calling out for help. Intrigued, I decided to explore Pine Hill, drawn by the allure of its mystery. The drive took me through dense forests and winding roads. As I approached, a thick fog rolled in, obscuring the path ahead. It felt wrong, like stepping into another world. I set up camp near a clearing, the only light coming from my small lantern. As darkness settled, I felt the familiar prick of unease. The wind howled through the trees, and shadows danced at the edges of the clearing. That night, I awoke to a voice, a soft, melodic whisper that called my name. I strained to hear, but the words were muddled, beckoning me to follow. Curiosity gnawed at my mind, and against my better judgment, I unzipped my tent and stepped into the fog. The air was thick and cold, wrapping around me like a shroud. I followed the voice deeper into the woods, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and intrigue. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal hands. The whisper grew louder, more urgent, as if it knew I was coming. Finally, I arrived at a small clearing bathed in an ethereal light. In the center stood a figure shrouded in mist. Her face was obscured, but I could see long flowing hair and a tattered dress that seemed to flicker like a flame. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice soft but filled with desperation. I hesitated, every instinct screaming to turn back. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The forest keeps me," she said, a tear rolling down her translucent cheek. "I cannot leave." I felt a strange compulsion to approach her, to reach out. But as I took a step forward, the ground beneath me shifted, revealing a series of skeletal remains half buried in the earth. I froze, horrified. This was no ordinary ghost. She was a warden of the lost, a creature that fed on despair. "No!" I screamed, stumbling back as the fog thickened, closing in around me. The whispering grew into a cacophony, drowning out my thoughts. I turned and ran, branches clawing at my skin as I tore through the underbrush, the figure's mournful cries echoing behind me. I stumbled back to my campsite, heart pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps. I tore down my tent, the chill of the night creeping into my bones. I drove away, the haunting whispers of Pine Hill following me, lingering like a bad dream I couldn't shake. Returned to the dunes. I thought I could leave it all behind, but the darkness from those experiences clung to me. I felt a pull, an inevitable return to the great sand dunes. Maybe it was foolishness, or perhaps a need for closure, but I couldn't ignore the call. This time, I arrived during the day, the sun shining brightly over the dunes. I approached the same spot where I had first seen the creature, half expecting it to appear. I explored the area, hoping to find some evidence of what had haunted me. As I climbed the highest dune, the wind whipped around me, and I heard it again, those whispers, faint but unmistakable, carried by the breeze. They wrapped around me, pulling me closer to the edge. Heart racing, I peered down into the valley below, where shadows seemed to gather. Suddenly, I spotted something glinting in the sand. Curious, I carefully made my way down and unearthed a small, intricately carved figure. It was similar to the trinkets I had seen in the Appalachian Grove, but different, a dark depiction of a creature with elongated limbs and empty eyes. As I turned it in my hand, a chilling laugh echoed through the dunes, and the whispers intensified. I dropped the figure, the sound of it hitting the sand swallowed by the howling wind. In that moment, I realized what I had discovered, a connection between the places, the lost souls bound to both. The creature appeared then, rising from the sands like a nightmare made flesh. Its eyes bore into me, and I felt the weight of all the lost souls, those from the dunes, the woods, and every other dark place I had wandered. They were trapped, longing for release, feeding the darkness that lurked in the wild. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached my car. As I drove away, the whispers faded, but I knew the truth. The wilderness was alive, a place where shadows lingered and the lost were always waiting. Somewhere in the depths of those woods and dunes, the horrors waited for the next curious soul. And no matter how far I ran, the memories of what I had seen and what was still watching would haunt me forever. The lure of the forgotten trail. It had been months since my unsettling encounters in the wilderness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing me back to nature, a force I couldn't explain. The whispers had quieted, but I was still haunted by the memories, the shadows that flickered at the edge of my vision, the haunting cries that echoed in my mind. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself at the edge of a lesser-known trail in the Rockies, shrouded in mist. This trail was notorious among locals, whispered about in hushed tones. They warned of a dark presence lurking in the trees, a malevolent spirit that played tricks on travelers, leading them into the depths of the forest, never to return. Ignoring my better judgment, I ventured forth, the ground crunching beneath my boots. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. It was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of a bird. I pressed on, intrigued by the stories and eager to confront whatever lay ahead. As I hiked deeper, the trees closed in around me, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. I felt the familiar sensation of being watched, but I shrugged it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. I reached a fork in the path, one side leading further into the heart of the forest, the other curling back towards civilization. Against my better judgment, I took the path into the depths. The fog thickened, obscuring my vision, and I felt an overwhelming urge to continue, as if the forest itself was pulling me in. As I walked, I began to hear faint voices, low and melodic, like a siren song. "Help us," they beckoned, echoing from the shadows. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I was about to turn back when I saw something glimmering through the trees, a small clearing bathed in an otherworldly light. Against all reason, I stepped into the clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, overgrown with vines and moss. Surrounding it were offerings, dried flowers, bones, and trinkets, much like those I had found in the other woods. The atmosphere felt charged, alive with energy, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. "Join us," they urged, the voices swirling around me like a storm. I felt drawn to the altar, compelled to touch it. But as I reached out, a vision struck me, a flood of memories, flashes of faces filled with terror and despair. I stumbled back, realizing that those who had come before had made offerings, hoping to appease whatever dark force resided here. In that moment, I heard a rustling behind me. I turned slowly, my heart racing. From the shadows emerged a figure, gaunt and pale, its eyes hollow and empty. It was a man, or what was left of one, his mouth moving in silent screams. I felt my breath hitch as the truth settled in. This was the spirit of someone lost to the forest, trapped by its malevolence. "Run," he mouthed, but the sound was swallowed by the whispers, now a deafening roar. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, the ground seeming to shift beneath my feet. Branches clawed at my arms, and I could feel the presence closing in around me. I sprinted back down the trail, my pulse pounding in my ears. The whispers echoed in my mind, urging me to stop, to look back, but I refused. I burst onto the main trail, gasping for breath, and didn't stop until I reached my car. Shadows of the forgotten forest. Shaking, I drove away from the Rockies, desperate to distance myself from the horrors I had just encountered. I thought of the man I had seen, and the souls trapped within the forest. But as I crossed the state line, a heavy weight settled in my chest. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was still being watched. Weeks passed, and the shadows of my experiences loomed over me. I tried to return to normal life, but sleep eluded me. Every night, I dreamt of the clearing, the whispers, and the eyes of the lost staring into my soul. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, I dove into research, uncovering more about the local legends surrounding the areas I had visited. I stumbled upon a chilling story about a cult that had once thrived in the very forest I had hiked, known for its dark rituals and sacrifices to appease the spirits of the land. The more I read, the more I felt the pull to return. This time, I would go equipped with knowledge. Armed with a flashlight and a journal, I ventured back to the Rockies, determined to document my findings and confront the darkness head-on. As I hiked to the altar clearing once more, the fog rolled in like an old friend, wrapping around me with an eerie familiarity. I felt the whispers as soon as I stepped into the clearing, a chaotic chorus of voices that tugged at my mind. I steadied my breath, focusing on the altar. I began to write, noting my surroundings, the feelings that enveloped me. The whispers quieted slightly, as if intrigued by my presence. "What do you want?" I called out, my voice shaking. "What happened here?" In response, the wind howled and the ground trembled. The voices crescendoed, filling the air with urgency. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and my heart raced as images flooded my mind once more. Rituals performed under the cover of darkness, the screams of those who were sacrificed, their faces twisted in agony. I gasped, the horror of their suffering overwhelming. I realized the whispers were not just cries for help. They were remnants of their pain, echoing through the ages. I had to do something. With trembling hands, I placed my journal on the altar as an offering. "I will tell you a story," I vowed. "I will make sure you are not forgotten." As I stepped back, the air grew still. The whispers softened, almost like a sigh of relief. I felt a weight lift, as if the spirits were grateful for the acknowledgement. But as I turned to leave, I heard a soft, chilling voice, distinct from the others. "Stay with us," it whispered, laced with longing. I hesitated, my heart pounding. For a fleeting moment, I felt a strange sense of belonging, a pull to join the lost souls. But I shook my head, clearing my mind. "No," I replied firmly. "You deserve peace." With that, I turned and ran back down the trail, the whispers fading behind me. As I reached my car, I glanced back one last time. The fog lifted, revealing the clearing bathed in golden sunlight, the altar standing silently as if it had never been tainted by darkness. The unseen. Returning home, I felt changed. I had confronted the shadows of the past, but the experience haunted me. I shared my findings, wrote articles, and even spoke at local events. But no matter how much I tried to educate others, I felt the grip of the wilderness still clinging to me. One night, while preparing for bed, I noticed my journal on the table. It seemed to glow in the dim light, beckoning me to open it. I hesitated but finally picked it up. As I flipped through the pages, I found something unsettling. A drawing I didn't remember making. In the center of the page was the figure of the man I had seen in the forest, his face etched with sorrow and desperation. Around him were sketches of twisted trees and the altar, but at the bottom there was a dark shadow that seemed to pulse with energy. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Had I unknowingly invited something into my life with my offerings? I closed the journal, placing it back on the table, and tried to shake off the unease. But that night I was awoken by a soft tapping on my window. My heart raced as I lay still, listening. The tapping continued, persistent and rhythmic. Mustering my courage, I crept to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing was there, just the stillness of the night. I let out a shaky breath, returning to bed, but sleep would not come. The tapping persisted, now accompanied by the whispers I had grown to dread. "Help us! Help us!" Days turned into weeks, and the haunting continued. I could feel the presence in my home, cold spots, flickering lights, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. It was as if the shadows I had encountered in the woods had followed me back. Epilogue. Echoes of the past. Months later, life began to return to normal. The shadows that once haunted me had receded, replaced by a renewed sense of peace. I continued to share the stories of those lost in the wilderness, determined to keep their memories alive. But I never forgot what I had encountered. The echoes of the past lingered, a reminder that some places hold secrets, dark and twisted, waiting for the curious to uncover them. The wilderness is a living entity, both beautiful and terrifying, and I knew that I had brushed against its hidden depths. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear a soft whisper, a fleeting memory of the spirits I had encountered. I would close my eyes and listen, knowing that I had done my part to honor their stories, and though I may never return to the darkest corners of the wild, I would carry their voices with me, a testament to the fragile line between our world and the unseen. The keeper of secrets. As the seasons changed and autumn gave way to winter, I thought my encounters with the supernatural had come to an end. Yet the memories of the wilderness still flickered in my mind like the last embers of a dying fire. I filled my days with mundane tasks, but each night the shadows crept back into my thoughts, and the whispers returned like an old friend I could not shake. One evening, while going through old boxes in my attic, I stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound book. Its cover was worn, and the pages smelled of age and neglect. As I opened it, I realized it contained local folklore, tales passed down through generations. Among the stories was one that caught my attention, a legend about a woman known as the Keeper of Secrets, said to dwell in the depths of the forest, a guardian of lost souls and dark knowledge. The tale spoke of her ability to reveal hidden truths to those brave enough to seek her out. Many who ventured into the woods seeking answers never returned, their fates woven into the fabric of the forest itself. The story warned that the keeper would demand a price, a piece of the seeker's soul, something they held dear. Intrigued and terrified, I felt an inexplicable urge to find her. What truths might I uncover? I had faced the darkness before, surely I could confront it again. I began preparing for a journey back to the Rockies, this time armed with more than just curiosity. I sought closure. As I hiked the familiar trails, a snowstorm brewed on the horizon. The sky darkened and the wind howled like a living thing, echoing the whispers from my past. I reached the clearing, where the altar stood stark against the winter landscape, the air thick with anticipation. That night, I built a fire and called out to the keeper. I spoke of my journeys, my fears, and the stories of the souls I had encountered. The flames danced wildly, and the cold seemed to retreat, replaced by a strange warmth. "I seek the truth," I declared, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Silence enveloped me, but then, as if summoned by my words, a figure emerged from the trees. She was cloaked in shadows, her face obscured beneath the hood. The air grew heavy with a palpable energy, and I felt the weight of her presence as she stepped closer. "Why have you come, seeker?" Her voice was like the rustling leaves, haunting yet strangely soothing. "I wish to understand," I replied, my voice trembling. "The spirits I've encountered, the darkness that lingers, what is their purpose? What do you guard?" The keeper smiled, though I couldn't see her expression. "Knowledge comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay?" I hesitated, my mind racing. What could I offer? I thought of my past, the pain I had carried, the relationships I had sacrificed in pursuit of understanding. "I offer my fears," I said finally. "The fear that binds me." Her laughter was soft and eerie. "Fear is a weight many carry. It can be both a burden and a guide. But remember, every truth has its price." With a wave of her hand, the flames flickered and visions filled my mind. I was transported to the heart of the forest, surrounded by spectral figures. I saw the man from my previous encounters, the keeper's other victims, all trapped in a limbo between worlds. They reached out, their eyes pleading, desperate for release. "You see," the keeper's voice echoed around me, "they are not here to haunt you. They seek to be remembered, their stories told. Only then can they find peace." I felt the weight of their sorrow and the burden of their lost dreams. "What can I do?" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "Honor them, speak their names, bring their tales into the light." The visions faded, and I stumbled back to the clearing, gasping for breath. The keeper stood before me, her form now clearer, her eyes shimmering like stars. "You have glimpsed the truth. Now you must decide." The choice. I felt raw, exposed. The truth was heavy, but the keeper's words offered a glimmer of hope. "I will tell their stories," I vowed. "I will not let them fade into darkness." "Then you must also confront your own darkness," she warned, her gaze piercing through me. "What you fear most will seek you out." Before I could respond, she raised her hand, and shadows swirled around us, enveloping me in a vortex of darkness. I felt my heart race, fear clawing at my insides. Suddenly, I was transported into a different realm, a twisted version of the forest, filled with grotesque figures and echoes of screams. "Face your fear," the keeper's voice rang out, echoing through the chaos. I stumbled through the shadows, encountering manifestations of my greatest fears: loss, failure, and the suffocating weight of regret. Each figure mirrored a part of my past, taunting me with memories I had long buried. I struggled to breathe, fighting against the tide of despair. But then I remembered the souls I had encountered, their pain, their longing for remembrance. I took a deep breath and began to speak their names, one by one. With each name, the shadows began to recede, and the figures dissolved into mist. "You are not alone," I called out into the void. "Your stories will be told." As the final name escaped my lips, the darkness shattered like glass, and I found myself back in the clearing, gasping for air. The keeper stood before me, her form now radiant, filled with a light that dispelled the shadows. "You have faced your fears," she said, her voice warm and gentle. "Now you hold the power to free those lost in the dark." The light of truth. In the days that followed, I returned home, my heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. I began to write, pouring my experiences onto the pages of my journal. I wrote not just about my encounters, but about the lives of the souls I had met, weaving their stories together like a tapestry of resilience and hope. Each article, each story shared, felt like a tribute to those who had been lost. The whispers that had once haunted me now became a gentle reminder of the lives that needed to be honored. I began to share these tales online and at local gatherings, slowly building a community of like-minded individuals who sought to remember and celebrate the forgotten. As the seasons changed again, I found peace in the knowledge that the keeper's gift had been passed on. The spirits I had encountered no longer felt like burdens, they had become companions, guiding me through my writing. But sometimes, late at night, I would still hear a soft whisper echoing through the stillness. "Thank you," it would say, a breath of wind brushing against my skin. I knew that I had honored their stories, that they were finally at rest. One evening, as I stood on my porch, I glanced at the horizon where the mountains met the sky. I thought of the forest, the altar, and the keeper of secrets. I felt a strange comfort in knowing that I was not alone in my journey. The wilderness would always hold its mysteries, but I had learned that by sharing the stories, I could keep their memory alive. And perhaps in doing so, I had become a keeper myself, an unwitting guardian of the stories that needed to be told, a bridge between the living and the lost. The darkness would always linger in the corners of the world, but as long as there were those willing to listen, the light of truth would never fade. The veil between worlds. This is the realm of forgotten souls, the keeper explained, her voice echoing in the strange atmosphere. Here the lost wander, seeking closure. Some are trapped by their own regrets, while others are tethered to this place by darkness. As we walked through the shadowy landscape, I saw figures flickering in and out of existence, echoes of people caught in moments of despair. A woman knelt by a tree, weeping silently, while a man paced back and forth, his face twisted in agony. I felt their sorrow wash over me like a tide. Why are they here? I asked, my heart heavy. They cannot move on until their stories are told. They need someone to bear witness to their pain. I looked at the keeper, understanding dawning. You want me to help them? Indeed, but the price you paid before has not been enough. To release these souls, you must face your own deepest regrets, those you have yet to acknowledge. As she spoke, I felt a cold wind whip through the trees, carrying with it fragments of memories, failures, lost friendships, the burdens I had carried for so long. I braced myself, knowing I would have to confront these ghosts head-on. The keeper gestured toward a clearing ahead. There you will find the truth you seek, but be warned, what you face will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Confronting the past. I stepped into the clearing, heart pounding, and the air grew still. In the center stood a mirror, its surface rippling like water. As I approached, I saw not my reflection, but the faces of those I had hurt, the friends I had abandoned, the family I had distanced myself from, all the choices I had made that led me to this point. Each face was filled with sorrow and disappointment, and I felt the weight of their gazes bearing down on me. You left us, one voice said, a whisper filled with pain. You chose knowledge over us. Tears welled in my eyes as I faced my past. I was searching for answers, I pleaded. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best. The mirror distorted, and I saw moments I had long tried to forget. Arguments, cold silences, the moments I chose solitude over connection. You cannot move forward without acknowledging what you left behind, the keeper's voice echoed in my mind. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the mirror, forcing myself to confront the pain I had caused. I'm sorry, I said, my voice trembling. I'm so sorry for the hurt I've caused. I see now how my choices impacted you, and I regret every moment I let my fear of vulnerability keep me away. The mirrors shimmered, and the faces began to fade, replaced by warmth and forgiveness. We are not your enemies, a familiar voice spoke softly. We want you to find peace, just as we seek ours. I felt a surge of emotion wash over me. I reached out, my fingers grazing the mirror's surface. I will carry your stories, I promised. I will share them and honor our connections. As the last of their images dissolved, the clearing filled with light. The weight in my chest began to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity. I turned to the keeper, tears streaming down my face. I understand now, I said, my voice choked with emotion. I have to be open about my past to truly move forward. Very well, she replied, her expression serene. You have faced your regrets, and in doing so, you have freed not only yourself, but the souls tied to your past. The transformation. The realm around us began to shift, and I felt a warmth enveloping me. The air sparkled with light, and the shadows that once haunted the clearing began to dissipate. The keeper smiled, her form shimmering like a mirage. You have broken the cycle. Now you can help others do the same. I watched as the figures of the lost souls transformed, their forms brightening until they dissolved into beams of light, soaring into the sky. Each one left behind a flicker of warmth, a reminder of the stories I had vowed to tell. As the last soul ascended, I turned to the keeper. What now? I asked, breathless. Now you must return. Share your experience, share their stories, and become a beacon for others lost in the shadows. As her words faded, I felt the familiar pulling sensation again, and before I knew it, I was back in the clearing at the altar, the fire still crackling softly. The weight of my journey pressed upon me, but it was no longer a burden, it was a call to action. A new path. Days turned into weeks as I poured my energy into sharing not just my story, but the stories of those I had met along the way. I organized gatherings, inviting people to share their own experiences of loss, regret, and healing. Each session became a sacred space where we could honor the shadows of our past and find strength in our shared humanity. I reached out to the families of the lost souls, sharing their tales, and to my surprise, many responded with gratitude. They too were searching for closure, for a way to keep the memories of their loved ones alive. Together, we formed a community of remembrance and healing, united by the understanding that our stories could break the cycle of despair. As the years passed, I returned to the mountains often, each time feeling a deeper connection to the keeper. I never saw her again, but I felt her presence in the whispers of the wind and the rustle of leaves, a reminder of the lessons she had imparted. One day, while hiking a familiar trail, I stumbled upon a young woman sitting by the edge of a creek, tears streaming down her face. I approached cautiously, sensing her pain. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. She looked up, her eyes filled with despair. "I'm lost," she whispered. "I don't know how to move on." In that moment, I realized that my journey had come full circle. I sat beside her, sharing my own experiences, the encounters with the keeper, the lost souls, and the power of storytelling. "You're not alone," I assured her. "There's a community out there that wants to help you. You just have to let them in." As she listened, I saw the flicker of hope ignite in her eyes. I felt the weight of the past lift from my shoulders, replaced by a renewed purpose. The wilderness would always be a place of shadows and secrets, but it was also a realm of connection, healing, and light. The legacy of stories. In the years that followed, my life became intertwined with the wilderness and its stories. I traveled to other places, sharing the tales of the lost, the beauty of vulnerability, and the power of connection. Each new story I encountered deepened my understanding of the human experience, and I became a conduit for healing. I often returned to the mountains, to the clearing where I had first met the keeper. The altar remained, a silent guardian of the stories woven into the very fabric of the land. Each visit felt like a homecoming, a reminder of the journey I had taken and the lives I had touched. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat by the altar, I closed my eyes and listened to the wind. The whispers had transformed from haunting echoes to gentle reminders of those I had come to honor. I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me. I had become the keeper of their stories, just as the keeper had once been for me. And in doing so, I had found my own path. A journey filled with light, love, and the unwavering connection to the world around me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew that the wilderness would always hold its mysteries, but the bonds forged in shared stories would forever shine brighter than any shadow. In the dance of light and dark, I had learned the most important truth of all: we are never truly alone. The invitation. As the years passed, my reputation as a storyteller grew. I was invited to various events, book clubs, community gatherings, and even a few podcasts, where I shared the tales of the lost souls and the lessons I learned from the keeper. Each story resonated deeply with those who heard them, igniting conversations about loss, healing, and the need for connection. One evening, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a retreat in the mountains. The organizer had read my articles and was eager for me to share my experiences with a group focused on healing and transformation. Intrigued, I accepted, feeling a familiar pull to return to the place that had shaped my journey. As I prepared for the retreat, I couldn't shake a sense of anticipation mixed with unease. The mountains held their own secrets, and I wondered if I might encounter the keeper again, or if there were new lessons waiting for me. The retreat. Arriving at the retreat center, I was struck by the beauty of the landscape. The air was crisp, the trees adorned with autumn leaves that crunched underfoot. I was greeted by a warm group of individuals seeking solace and renewal. As I shared my story, their eyes filled with empathy and understanding. It was a safe space, and I felt the weight of shared experiences binding us together. In the evenings, we gathered around a bonfire, sharing our own tales of loss and resilience. I encouraged participants to connect with their emotions, to express their fears and hopes. With each story shared, the air felt charged with a healing energy, weaving a tapestry of collective experience. But one night, as the fire crackled and the moon hung low in the sky, a newcomer arrived. She seemed out of place, her eyes darting nervously, her aura heavy with unspoken pain. I approached her, sensing her struggle. "I'm not sure I belong here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're here for a reason," I replied softly. "What brought you?" She hesitated, glancing toward the fire. "I lost someone, and I don't know how to move on." As she spoke, I felt a surge of empathy. "Tell me about them," I urged gently. "A dark encounter." As she shared her story, I noticed the flames flicker, casting strange shadows that danced around us. The atmosphere shifted, growing heavier, almost oppressive. The other participants continued to share their stories, but I could feel a darkness coiling in the corners of my mind. "I was so wrapped up in my own grief," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I pushed everyone away. Now I'm haunted by what could have been." "Grief can be isolating," I said, trying to offer comfort. "But you're not alone in this." Suddenly, the air grew colder, and I felt a chill race down my spine. The shadows deepened around the fire, and I glanced back at the others. They were still engrossed in their stories, oblivious to the shift in energy. But I could feel something dark lingering at the edges of the gathering, watching. I turned back to the woman. "What was their name?" I'd asked, trying to draw her focus. "Leela," she whispered, her voice cracking. "She was my sister." At the sound of the name, the darkness surged forward, wrapping around us like a thick fog. I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of despair and loss, as if Leela's spirit had entered the space, drawing on her sister's grief. "Leela," I called, feeling the energy shift once more. "Are you here?" The spirits grasped. In an instant, the world around us transformed. The fire flickered violently, and the warm glow was replaced by an eerie blue light. I stood in a vision of the past, an image of a vibrant forest, alive with laughter and joy. But at its center was a figure cloaked in shadows, Leela, her expression twisted in anguish. "Help me," a voice echoed, a haunting melody that reverberated in my bones. "I am lost." I looked back at the woman beside me, her face pale with fear. "She needs you to acknowledge her," I urged, "to share the love you had for her." But the darkness swirled, threatening to pull me under. "No," I shouted, forcing myself to stay grounded. "You must speak to her. Let her know she's not forgotten." Tears streamed down the woman's face as she choked out, "Leela, I love you. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." As the words left her lips, the shadows began to recede, and the vision of the forest grew clearer. Leela stepped forward, her features softening, the anguish replaced by a sense of peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. "I've waited so long to hear those words." The release. In that moment, the connection between the sisters ignited a powerful light that pushed back the darkness. The shadows melted away, revealing the warm glow of the fire and the concerned faces of the other participants. I felt the energy shift again, lighter this time. The weight of grief and regret that had enveloped the woman began to lift as she reached out, extending her hand toward the apparition of her sister. "Please don't go," she pleaded, tears mingling with relief. "It's time for you to let me go," Leela said softly. "You have to live for both of us now." With a final serene smile, Leela faded into the light, leaving behind an ethereal glow. The air felt lighter, the atmosphere infused with warmth and hope. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing but with a look of relief washing over her. The other participants rallied around her, offering comfort and support. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back. "You did it," I whispered. "You honored her." As the night wore on, the retreat continued, but I could feel a shift in the energy. The darkness that had loomed earlier had been vanquished, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and healing, and new understanding. The following morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, I reflected on the experience. The retreat had evolved into something greater than I could have imagined. We had transformed not just through shared stories, but through a tangible connection with the spirits of our past. Before leaving, I gathered everyone together for a final circle. "Each of us carries stories that can heal," I said, looking around at the faces filled with newfound strength. "Let's promise to honor those who've come before us, to share their stories, and to break the cycles of grief and despair." The group nodded, and I could feel the collective energy of commitment radiating through the circle. We shared contact information, promising to stay connected, to continue sharing our journeys, and to support one another in our healing. As I walked away from the retreat center, the mountains loomed large in the distance, their majesty filled with promise. I realized that the Keeper had not only imparted lessons about the lost, she had shown me the power of connection and community. The final call. Months later, I received a message from the woman I had helped, the one with the sister named Lila. She had organized a community event to honor the lost souls in our lives, and she wanted me to speak. It was a beautiful gesture, and I felt honored to participate. On the day of the event, people gathered in a local park, candles flickering against the twilight sky. We shared stories, laughter, and tears, creating a tapestry of memories woven with love. As I stood before the crowd, I felt the presence of those who had come before, their spirits mingling with ours. As the last candle was lit, I looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle above. I felt the Keeper's presence once more, a reminder of the journey I had taken and the connections I had forged. The darkness still existed, but now it was balanced by the light we had created together. In that moment, I understood that the wilderness, both inside and out, would always be a part of me, a vast landscape of stories waiting to be told. And as long as I continued to listen, to share, and to honor the lost, I would remain a bridge between the living and the spirits, a keeper of the light. The gathering storm. As the community event drew to a close, the air buzzed with a sense of connection and renewal. Yet beneath the surface, I sensed a shadow lurking, a whisper of unease that I couldn't quite shake. Days passed, and while I reveled in the stories shared and the bonds forged, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was amiss. I continued to receive messages from the woman who organized the event, whom I had come to know as Emma. She spoke of a growing interest in a group dedicated to exploring the supernatural and the stories of lost souls. It sounded intriguing, but something about her enthusiasm felt tinged with desperation. One evening, I received a frantic call from Emma. "You need to come back to the mountains," she urged, her voice trembling. "I've been feeling strange things. Like the forest is alive in ways I can't explain." My heart raced. I packed my gear, the sense of urgency pulling me back to the very place that had changed my life. The drive to the mountains was filled with memories of the keeper, of the lost souls, and of the lessons learned. I knew I had to confront whatever darkness had begun to encroach upon our newfound community. The forest awakens. Upon my arrival, the air was thick with tension. Emma met me at the retreat center, her eyes wide with fear. "I've been hearing whispers in the woods," she confessed, "not the gentle kind we experienced before. This is different, dark, angry." I followed her into the heart of the forest, where the trees loomed like sentinels. The atmosphere felt charged, almost electric, as if the very ground beneath us was alive with something unseen. As we walked deeper, I noticed that the usual sounds of the forest, birds, rustling leaves, had fallen silent. "Do you feel that?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. Before I could respond, the wind picked up, swirling around us in a frenzy. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "We need to be careful," I cautioned. "This could be the unrest of the souls who haven't found peace." Emma nodded, her fear palpable. "I think there's something tied to our stories, something we might have awakened." The convergence. We reached a clearing where the retreat had been held before, but it felt different now, charged with an energy that both exhilarated and terrified me. The trees were twisted and gnarled, and the ground was littered with broken branches, as if a storm had swept through. Suddenly, the air crackled, and I felt a presence materialize around us. Figures began to emerge from the shadows, lost souls with hollow eyes and expressions twisted in anguish. They circled us, their whispers echoing like a mournful chorus. "Why have you come?" One voice wailed, a haunting cry that sent shivers through my entire being. "You've disturbed our rest." I stepped forward, heart pounding. "We came to honor you, to tell your stories. We thought it would bring you peace." "Peace?" Another soul hissed, the shadows twisting around them. "You cannot silence our pain. You've only awakened it." I felt Emma's hand grip my arm tightly. "What do we do?" she whispered, fear etched across her face. The Keeper's lesson. In that moment, I remembered the Keeper's teachings, the importance of acknowledging the pain and honoring the lost. "We need to listen," I said, trying to summon courage. "We can't help you if we don't understand." The spirits paused, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion. "Listen," one echoed. "You would hear our sorrow." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "We want to know your stories, to share them with the world. We want to bring light to your darkness." For a moment, the shadows seemed to retreat, allowing a glimmer of light to break through. The spirits hovered, their faces softened with hope. "Then we will tell you," a voice finally said, echoing like distant thunder. The stories unveiled. As the spirits began to share their stories, the air grew heavy with emotion. Each tale revealed the pain they had endured, betrayal, loss, unfulfilled dreams, each woven with threads of grief that bound them to the earth. I listened, my heart aching as I absorbed their anguish and their longing for recognition. Emma stood beside me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I thought we were helping them." "But in our haste, we overlooked their true pain," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "We tried to shine a light without fully understanding the darkness." The spirits began to shimmer, their forms becoming more solid, their emotions more palpable. "You wish to honor us?" one spirit asked, its voice heavy with sorrow. "Then you must confront your own darkness, just as we have." A shared journey. With those words, the ground beneath us shook, and I felt a surge of energy rushing through me. The spirits began to swirl around us, their whispers intensifying, calling forth our own fears and regrets. Images flashed before my eyes, moments of my past where I had faltered, where I had let fear dictate my choices. "I'm sorry," I cried out, feeling the weight of my own guilt and sorrow. "I'm so sorry for not fully recognizing the depth of your pain." Emma echoed my sentiment, tears streaming down her face. "We will share your stories. We will honor you." In that moment of shared vulnerability, the energy shifted. The spirits began to draw closer, their expressions transforming from anguish to something resembling gratitude. "You have faced your truth," one whispered. "Now we can find peace." The release. As the spirits began to dissipate into the light, the shadows that had once gripped the forest slowly began to fade. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive energy lifted, revealing a new sense of calm. I felt a warmth enveloping me, as if the spirits were wrapping us in their embrace. "We will return to the light," another spirit said, their voice now a soothing melody. "But remember, our stories must be shared. They are our legacy." "I promise," I replied, my heart swelling with emotion. "We will honor you." With those final words, the last of the spirits dissolved into beams of light, soaring into the sky. The clearing was now bathed in warmth, the shadows having retreated to their corners. A new dawn. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Emma and I stood in silence, processing what had just occurred. The forest, once filled with tension, now felt alive with possibility. The connection we had forged with the spirits had not only brought them peace, but had also deepened our understanding of our own journeys. "I never expected any of this," Emma said softly, her voice steadying. "I thought I was just looking for a way to honor my sister. But this was so much more." "Yes," I agreed, filled with gratitude. "We learned that our stories are intertwined. We carry the weight of our pasts, but we can also transform that pain into something beautiful." We began to make our way back to the retreat center, feeling the weight of the experience settle into our bones. As we walked, the sun rose higher, illuminating the path ahead. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the work we had begun was far from over. The legacy of connection. In the weeks that followed, Emma and I organized a series of workshops, inviting others to join us in sharing their stories of loss and healing. The community flourished, becoming a sanctuary where individuals could connect with their pain and celebrate their journeys. Together, we crafted a living tapestry of stories, each thread representing a soul, a connection, a lesson learned. We began to document these experiences, creating a book dedicated to the lost souls who had shaped our lives. As I sat down to write, I felt the presence of the keeper guiding my pen. "Share the stories," she seemed to whisper. "Let them be heard." The book became a collection not only of personal stories, but also of the lessons we had learned from the spirits. It was a testament to the power of vulnerability, connection, and the healing that comes from facing our fears. A call to remember. On the day of the book's release, we held a gathering in the forest where it all began. The air was filled with anticipation, and I could feel the spirits lingering, their energy swirling around us. As we shared our stories with those gathered, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey we had undertaken. "Tonight, we honor not just our stories, but the stories of those who came before us," I said, standing before the crowd. Each of us carries a piece of the past, and in sharing these tales, we keep their memories alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the clearing, I looked up at the trees, feeling the weight of the past lift. The darkness that had once threatened to consume us had transformed into light, a legacy of connection and healing. And as I closed my eyes, I felt the presence of the Keeper and the souls we had honored. They were with us, woven into the very fabric of our stories, reminding us that we are never truly alone. In the wilderness of life, we carry each other's burdens, illuminating the darkness with the light of our shared experiences. The invitation returns. As the months rolled on, the community we had built continued to thrive. Each gathering filled with stories and laughter felt like a sacred space where healing happened naturally. Yet, even in the warmth of our connections, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper awaited us in the woods. One evening, as I sat on my porch reflecting on our progress, an email popped up from Emma. The subject line read, "A new discovery." My heart raced as I opened it. "I found something," she wrote, "something in the forest. We need to explore it together. I think it could lead to deeper connections with the spirits." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Curiosity mingled with unease. After all, we had faced the darkness before, but I couldn't ignore the thrill of the unknown. Into the unknown. We arranged to meet at the clearing where we had first encountered the spirits. As I arrived, I found Emma waiting, her expression a mix of excitement and apprehension. "You won't believe what I found," she said, leading me to a narrow path veiled by dense underbrush. As we walked, I could feel the air growing thicker, charged with a strange energy. We arrived at a secluded grove, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to hum with life. In the center stood a stone circle, each rock worn smooth by time, and at its center lay a small, intricately carved totem. "What do you think it is?" I asked, stepping closer. Emma knelt down, brushing her fingers over the surface. "I think it's a marker and gateway of sorts. It could be a place where the boundaries between our world and the spirit realm are thin." I felt a chill ripple through me. We need to approach this carefully. We don't want to disturb anything. A dark calling. As we stood in the grove, the atmosphere shifted. The light seemed to dim, and the shadows stretched, pulling at the corners of my vision. Whispers echoed through the trees, not the gentle voices we had come to know, but something darker, more insistent. "Do you hear that?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I replied, my heart racing. The whispers swelled, forming a chaotic symphony that made my skin crawl. "It feels urgent." Before I could react, the ground trembled, and the totem pulsed with energy, illuminating the grove in an eerie glow. The whispers grew louder, almost demanding. "You've come to awaken us," they called, a cacophony of voices entwined with anger and sorrow. "Stay back," I shouted, instinctively moving closer to Emma. "We don't mean any harm." The confrontation. But the energy around us intensified, and from the shadows, figures emerged, twisted forms filled with anguish. They circled us, their hollow eyes filled with desperation. "You've disturbed the peace," one spirit cried, its voice sharp and jagged. "You awakened what should remain buried." "Please," I pleaded, stepping forward. "We're here to listen, to understand. We don't want to hurt you." The spirits shrieked, and the totem pulsed violently. I felt the ground beneath my feet quake as the darkness surged forward, attempting to swallow us whole. "Emma!" I shouted, grabbing her arm. "We need to ground ourselves. We must confront this." We closed our eyes, focusing on the warmth of our connection, the love we had built through our community. "We're here for you," I called out. "We honor your stories. Share them with us." A glimmer of light. Suddenly, the air grew still, and the spirits paused, their shadows flickering. A single spirit stepped forward, its features more defined than the others. "You speak of honoring us, yet you've brought your own darkness here," it said, voice trembling. "Your fear stirs the anger within us." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steadying. "We didn't mean to disrupt anything. We want to help, to share your pain and bring it to light." The spirit's expression softened slightly. "Then you must confront your own darkness first. Only then can you help us find peace." With that, the energy around us shifted again, pulling me into a vision, a whirlwind of my past, where my own fears and failures played out like a haunting film reel. I saw the moments when I had turned away from connection, when I had allowed darkness to creep into my heart. The power of acknowledgement. Face it, Emma urged, her hand gripping mine tightly. We've come this far, we can't turn back now. I nodded, forcing myself to confront those painful memories. I acknowledged the darkness within me, I declared, my voice strong. The fear that has held me back, the mistakes I've made. I'm ready to share them. As I spoke, the spirits began to shift, their forms blurring between light and dark. I could see their anguish, but also their longing for connection. We've all known loss, I continued. We've all carried burdens. It's time to let them go together. A collective release with each word, the atmosphere lightened, the oppressive weight slowly lifting. The spirits started to form a circle around us, their shadows intertwining with our light. I could feel their energy mingling with ours, creating a bridge between our worlds. Tell us your stories, I implored, my heart racing. Let us honor you. One by one, the spirits began to share their tales, stories of love lost, of dreams unfulfilled, of the moments that had tethered them to this realm. Emma and I listened intently, allowing their emotions to wash over us. Each story was a thread woven into the fabric of our gathering, creating a tapestry rich with pain, but also with resilience. The dawn of understanding. As the last spirits shared their story, the grove began to glow with a warm light, illuminating the shadows that had once threatened to consume us. The energy shifted again, this time infused with a profound sense of peace. Thank you, the spirit said, a soft smile gracing its features. You have honored us. Now we can rest. With that, the spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the light that enveloped us. The grove felt alive, pulsing with energy, and I realized that our connection to the lost souls had deepened immeasurably. A new chapter. As we stood in the now quiet grove, Emma and I exchanged glances, a sense of relief washing over us. I can't believe what just happened, she breathed, all evident in her eyes. It was powerful, I agreed, still feeling the echoes of the spirit's stories reverberate within me. We forged a deeper connection, not only with them, but with ourselves. From that moment forward, we dedicated ourselves to creating spaces for others to confront their own darkness and honor the lost. We began organizing retreats focused on exploring grief, vulnerability, and the power of storytelling, each one an opportunity to connect with the spirits and with each other. The legacy continues. As the retreats grew in popularity, our community flourished. We welcomed people from all walks of life, each carrying their own burdens, their own stories. Together, we created a sanctuary of healing, where stories flowed freely and the bonds of empathy grew stronger. With each gathering, I felt the presence of the Keeper guiding us, her wisdom woven into the fabric of our work. She had taught us that acknowledging our pain allowed us to transform it into something beautiful. One evening, as we gathered in the grove again, I felt a familiar energy wash over me, a gentle reminder of the spirits we had honored. I closed my eyes and breathed in the crisp night air, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey we had undertaken together. We carry each other's burdens, I said, addressing the group. And in doing so, we keep the memories of the lost alive. Let's continue to share our stories and honor those who came before us. As we lit candles and shared our stories, the grove pulsed with light, the air shimmering with love and connection. I knew that the darkness would always exist, but together we had found a way to transform it into light. A legacy of resilience, empathy, and hope. A final reflection. Years later, as I sat down to write my next book, I reflected on how far we had come. The connections forged in those woods had not only changed my life, but had also created a ripple effect in the lives of countless others. I thought of the Keeper, the spirits, and all those who had come to share their stories. I could still feel their presence in the whisper of the wind, the rustle of the leaves, a reminder that we are never truly alone. In that moment, I realized the journey would continue, ever unfolding like the layers of a story. There would always be new souls to honor, new tales to share, and new darkness to face. But as long as we embraced our vulnerabilities and connected through our shared experiences, the light would always shine brighter than the shadows. And so, I set my pen to paper, ready to share the next chapter of our collective journey, a testament to the power of connection, the beauty of healing, and the enduring legacy of the stories that bind us all together.